I'm Sarah Russell.
I'm JQ Walker.
I'm Hind, and we are
the Neurodivergent Report, a research-based podcast by and for neurodivergent brains.
In each episode, we'll explore topics relating to neurodiversity and coping strategies by reviewing the literature and discussing current topics.
We will also have interview episodes where we sit down with experts in the field and listeners like you, with the hope that together we can all learn to heal in community.
However you are able to engage, thank you for being here. So today we're meeting with Zoe John Kay, and you're based in South Wales, UK.
That's right.
What do you do?
So for work, I am a gender, sex, and relationship diversity psychotherapist. So I work with predominantly queer and trans people, and also the majority of the people who come to see me are also neurodivergent, as I'm sure that you're already aware of the kind of big overlapping Venn diagrams of neurodivergence and kind of gender expansiveness and
other types of cultural divergences. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. So that is what I am doing for work. So I have a private practice. I am working entirely online with my clients who are mostly all over the UK, but I have a couple of people who are in mainland Europe, and one of my clients is shortly going to be moving to the US. I am also branching out a little in the sense that I am currently in the process of writing a book proposal, and I'm intending to, hopefully, if somebody picks it up, write a book. So that is going to be part of my my work as well. The book, hopefully, if it comes off, is going to be about particularly counsellors and psychotherapists working with or understanding the way that anti-fat bias impacts everything that a lot of clients bring into the room and a lot of the way that we interact with other people. I've been looking into that for a while and I bet there's some people have written some amazing stuff about how this shows up in like psychotherapy, and it turns out they haven't. So I'm going to have a go at putting something together on that, because it seems like there is a gap in the kind of study on that at the moment.
That is fascinating. And I'm secretly wondering if my co-host Hind has like a internal pinging towards that last one. Because I know you do Hind, I know you do all sorts of like side quests in your she's a medical doctor and she's in residency to be a psychiatrist. And so I'm just wondering what have you done any reading on anti-fat bias in your...
What I do know, because I went through a lot of weight fluctuation, that made me research my advantages and disadvantages of being of a larger side, that they're less likely to get recruited for work, less likely to be taken seriously by doctors for any medical issue. It was ringing a bell for me, and I was trying to constrain my enthusiasm and not take over and say, can you tell us a little, because at the end of the day, you're writing a book about it. We don't want you to talk about the whole thing in the podcast, but can you just tell us
the question, like, have you read anything about it?
Smart.
Yeah, I tried so hard to like give you the perfect
a little bit of like just teaser of what to expect and why should people care about this?
So there are two ways that I look at it. On the one hand, there is what a lot of people would refer to as fat phobia, which is like one-on-one, like anti-fat aggression, I suppose, and also like internalized sense of lower self-worth because of higher body size. The reason that I'm framing it as anti-fat bias specifically is because a lot of this is related to systemic issues rather than individual biases. So looking underneath it, as you said, you've already discovered that being hired for a job is less likely. There is a Harvard like implicit bias study that's been developed around like detecting anti-fat bias in people, and it's been found that when looking at images of people, and it's not even like fully realized images, it's like silhouettes, and it's flashing up silhouettes of a thinner person, a fatter person, a thinner person, a fatter person, and words. And you have to click on which kind of person you would associate that with. And the people with larger bodies are getting more associated with things like lazy, dirty, smelly, like it tends to be quite negatively coded. So there is this kind of underlying view of fat people as like less morally worthy as people than thinner people. Being fat is kind of seen as some kind of a moral failing rather than just a neutral fact about somebody's body. But the systemic angle on this is, some of that is about access to healthcare. Fat people experience all of the same health conditions that thin people do, but thin people are being usually taken directly to some kind of definitive treatment, whereas the recommendation for a lot of fat people for everything from, diabetes, heart disease, joint pain, all kinds of things is, have you considered losing weight? And what we do know is that the likelihood of sustained weight loss 5 years after a weight reduction program is less likely to be effective than treatment for stage 4 lung cancer. So you have this situation where the medical establishment particularly is recommending what is known to be an ineffective treatment that isn't really a treatment, that, is just kind of delaying access for folks to healthcare, but also around things like, is your blood pressure cuff going to take an accurate blood pressure reading? Should you be getting a troncoconical cuff instead of an oblong one to measure blood pressure in people? Do your examination couches hold a high enough weight? Do you have seats that people can sit in your waiting area? Do you have seats that people can sit in your restaurant, in your movie theatre, in anywhere? So the larger a person's body is, the greater amount of discrimination they are likely to experience at a systemic level. So it is about that kind of noticing where those biases are internally about how we think about people who are fatter, and also how we are making things accessible to people who are systemically excluded because of the size of their bodies from, in my case, counselling and psychotherapy.
Beautiful. 2 questions.
But while you were talking, Zoe, I was thinking that sometimes people's weight is considered like the first line problem instead of an underlying cause of a greater issue. Like, I am blessed with Graves' disease, which is a hyperthyroid. And most of the time, when people say, "Oh, what's that?" and then I tell them, they say, "Oh, well, at least it's not the other one." Hypothyroid, where I would just be fat and have to take medicine for the rest of my life. And honestly, all of the women in my family end up that way. And so they don't realize it, but they're playing in my face. And I just want to start like swinging. But you can't do that lest you break the social contract, I guess.
My question is, do you consider obesity a disease?
No, I don't personally. And the research that I've done so far suggests that a lot of the kind of moves to classify obesity as a disease has been driven by funding from pharmaceutical companies, largely from a US perspective of coding something so that it can be billable. There are clearly defined parameters. Having more fat than a different person is not really a disease. It may be something that increases vulnerability to particular illnesses. And I think that, again, a lot of the inherent bias in constructing research studies like medical research may be guiding some of the ways that research is being interpreted. I think there is something about how particularly medical healthcare professionals are seen to be scientific and therefore unimpeachable in their reasoning, whereas actually we are all people who are flawed, who have our biases. The way that we see things will be influenced by what we've learned growing up, what we've learned in our education, what we learn in society as a whole. And a lot of the time when I'm reading studies about, kind of weight and fatness and obesity as a disease or an epidemic is very much based on biases around being fat is automatically bad. And then
Yeah.
kind of reverse reasoning from that.
Do you think when people who answered the research assumptions, association of words, I'm sure they went with the first thing they thought about, and they probably wouldn't say that or associate that with someone who is of a larger size in real life. It's just the first thought they have because it's a bias. Do you think, in my case, I always say no one is extent of bias, we all have it, and I do think, as you're mentioning this, that my immediate thought process would go to these words because that's what has been told to me ever since I was a kid, through media, through whatever. It's more of a, I'm realizing now, a statement rather than a question, as seen if you agree with it. It's more than people checking their bias rather than saying I don't have one.
Yeah. I mean, I have biases myself. I'm very clear that my biases are around what you have just said. Do I believe that obesity is a disease? No, I do not. That is a belief that I have. That is a bias that I am bringing to looking at some of the research that is out there and interpreting that through my own lens of my own experiences and things that I've read and things that I've unpacked for myself. There is a really great writer called Reagan Chastain, who does a lot of going through kind of obesity research, and most recently looking at quite a lot of GLP-1 research, which, for people who aren't familiar, is the kind of weight loss shots that lots of people seem to be getting now, and looking at the ways that the studies around those things are constructed, where the biases are in those, how they are being reported, what is being included in the reports of the studies, what appears to be conspicuous by its absence in the reporting from the studies. She is doing great
Very
work
timely.
in drawing attention to the way that particularly medical research is especially skewed towards assuming that fat is inevitably bad, rather than having questions about that individual person's metabolic health overall, about whether or not they are eating well, whether or not they are moving, if they are able to move, what else is going on in their health. It is somebody walks in through the door, I see what they look like, I make a recommendation without even looking into that in any more detail. And she's doing some great work in kind of picking some of that apart.
That's amazing. I remembered my medical school education because I feel that, and this podcast is helping me do this, deconstructing all the biases that I have, that I've gained not only through my life, but through medical school. So
Decolonizing medicine.
yes, I have been thankfully exposed to a lot of beautiful people like you that are giving me a different perspective, because I've been taught that obesity is linked with diabetes and hypertension. And not only that, we have mannequins to practice on physical examination. The mannequins are never of larger size. I always have a hard time examining someone of larger size because I'm not equipped to do that. They never taught us how to do that and see where the heart is. They didn't teach us how to deal with that. I'm just realizing on a larger scale that they don't equip doctors to deal with people who are of a larger size.
Yeah.
So that ends up, what happens is you get a lower quality of care, because I'm sure also the medicines don't work the same way that they should for you, because it's around a 70-kilo white man. And so it's not going to work on you, it's not going to work on me, and it's not going to work on someone with a larger size.
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe that's why they have a poor quality of life. It's because the medical field is not tailored to them.
Yeah. And there is also a reasonable amount of research data out there now that suggests that people who have a larger body size will avoid going and seeking medical care because they expect to be disbelieved, because they expect to be prescribed weight loss for whatever it is they go for. They also expect to be on the receiving end of a disgust response. And I think that, what you're describing there in terms of you don't feel as though you've been trained and equipped to examine somebody who is fatter. And, I've spoken to multiple people who've said, the doctor is like, they don't want to touch me because it's like they're going to cat cooties or something from touching my body.
So if I want to jump in too, because I have a small body, I'm like the size of a child, and I have also been on the receiving end of being like my somatic symptoms being dismissed because of the size of my body. Like I was having, ovarian cysts, and I was like, it just hurts so bad I can't even walk up the stairs. And my OB was like, yeah, well, it's because you're so small. And I was like, what does that have to do with anything? And he's like, it's all cramped together. And I was like, okay, I guess. And also, people don't want to touch my body, even physical therapists. And I think it's because they're afraid of being like complained for sexually harassing me or something. And because of that, I receive a terrible quality of care over and over. Just because people are like afraid of me or something. I don't know. I don't know how else to qualify that, but I just wanted to jump in because I don't have the same experience, but very similar themes. To me, like people stigmatize people constantly over and over. The hierarchy, reinforcing the caste system, despicable.
What you're pulling out there is a really important aspect of that, which is the way in which body size intersects with other kinds of identity. We know from research and more historical record, really, that a lot of the historical roots of fat phobia and anti-fat bias comes from settler colonialism and transatlantic slave trade, making white people differentiated from the savage black person who has this lasciviously curvaceous body, while white women are pure and straight and, don't show any signs of bodily lust in their appearance, is a really big part of where a lot of these standards of appearance came from. You've also got the fact that the BMI, which is still being used very widely, the model that was created by a mathematician and statistician based on a population of white men in Scotland in the 1800s. And what this person was saying was what I'm looking for is the average man, because the average man is the perfect man, and the perfect man is what we should all be aspiring to. And that idea of average being normal and normal being aspirational goes through so many things, whether it is physical health, whether it is mental health and psychiatry, whether it is neurodivergence. How close are you to the normal? How far do you deviate from it? Is still a really big way of understanding how acceptable a person is.
Yeah. And if you're deviating from the normal, you suffer mentally, physically, financially, because you won't have, if you're different physically, your size in the store, whether you're too tall, too short, too large, too small, your seats at the airplane. I saw one video of a woman saying she has to buy 2 seats for herself. So that's more expensive. It's affecting every part of your life, literally.
Yeah.
Because the world is not tailored for you. Yeah.
No. And there's a couple of really great ways of kind of conceptualizing body size in terms of accessibility. One of which talks about a number of overlapping and interconnecting experiences around, as you said, buying clothing. Being able to physically move your body around, being able to fit in spaces. Like if you go to a restaurant, are you going to be able to fit in a chair? Are you able to get examined at a doctor's office? Because, do they have a couch that will support your weight and size to be properly examined whilst you are at
the blood pressure cuff, such a big deal.
Yeah, the troncoconical cuff is the hill on which I will die. Having a cuff that is shaped like this rather than shaped like this makes such a difference in terms of the accuracy of blood pressure readings for larger bodied people, and particularly, people who have arms that shape rather than arms that shape, is going to make such a difference. And yeah, just having the confidence to go into a doctor's office and know that people are going to listen to you on the basis of what your experience of your own life and your own symptoms, rather than somebody else's assumptions about what is going on for you based on your appearance. And that is something that, Black and other people of color experience. It's something that women overall experience in terms of being less believed and taken less seriously about pain and severity of symptoms. All of these things are interconnected.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for everyone who's listening, who might say, well, how is this related to the neurodivergent report? Well, being different from the normal is literally neurodivergent. And
Yeah.
so all these things do affect neurodiversity as well. So it's really important to support and
we've
understand other people's lenses. Yeah.
Mm.
Mhm. We weaved our
Like,
way into intersectionality. Do you want to just explain, Zoe, what the sort of definition of intersectionality is?
Sure. So it's a word that was coined and initially used by an academic and lawyer called Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a Black lawyer who was working in the US, who was specifically talking about the experience of somebody with two or more different identities being different to the experiences of people who have only one of those experiences. And in what she was talking about, I believe she was prosecuting a equal pay case. She was representing a woman, a Black woman, who was suing her employer for equal pay. And what she was arguing to the judge in that case was that as a Black woman, her client was being treated differently to how a white woman or a Black man was being treated in that situation. And the intersection of her two identities of being racialized Black and being gendered female was creating a very specific experience that would not be shared by people who only had one aspect of that identity.
I'm so glad
yeah.
I asked you, because that was much better words than I would have used. And I also didn't know that bit about her being a lawyer. That's wonderful. And yeah, so obviously neurodivergence is like another layer of our identity, sexuality, gender identity. Gosh, what are some other ones? Class identity. I want to cut in and say, like, there are some people out there who are saying that, like, class is the most important thing, and, like, we should be fighting for that more than anything. Even being, like, a wealthy Black woman in society is different than being a wealthy white man in society.
Didn't
Neurodivergent
Oprah
aside.
get rejected from a very expensive store because she was Black?
I have no
And that's
idea. They
Oprah.
were always really uncomfortable with her size and the fact that she was successful despite being a large Black woman. I just wanted to voice my disapproval of class reductionism and say that we need to care about all intersectionalities equally.
Yeah.
Maybe we can just do what makes us feel alive, but stop telling everybody else what's most important.
I want to add the class system in the UK in general is very dominant. I think Americans are very fascinated with an English accent. They don't know the difference between what's posh and what's not. And there's a lot of classism there. But yeah, I feel like it does affect even people of color in the UK.
Yes, it does. So I think that is a particular intersection that I am conscious of in the UK, is that I think it's becoming much more noticeable to me personally. I don't know about anybody else, but to me in the past couple of years, I am starting to notice that we have some very powerful people of colour in our political system in the UK. We've got some ministers in our government who are first or second generation kind of Indian or from different African countries, who are in are naturalized British, who are in the political system, who are acting in ways that are marginalizing disabled people who are like working class or even sort of below that level, if you like. So people who are unemployed or unemployable, who are disabled, and also kind of what I might call like pulling up the drawbridge. So the leader of the Conservative Party in the UK, a lady called Kemi Badenoch, if people aren't familiar with her, her parents moved to the UK when she was in her teens, I believe. And she has talked quite openly about how she doesn't think there should be so many immigrants coming to this country, and we should be closing the borders and sending people back, and the people who are here should all be integrating. And part of the reason that she seems to have this view, as far as I can tell, is that her parents were extremely wealthy in their home African country, also incredibly well educated. Her mum was a professor who went and worked in the US for a while at a university before coming to the UK. So she has this this particularly interesting intersection of, she is a person of color in what is, quite frankly, still a very institutionally racist country, who is using all of the language of power and being in a position of political power and oppressing people who are less financially and economically advantaged than she is. So it is kind of complex.
It is, yeah.
It feels like now it's going beyond, because previously it was, are you in the aristocracy or are you not? It now feels a lot more complex than that.
Are you willing to uphold the standards of colonialism? If so, we'll let you in the club. I mean, I know you're saying this person was from an African country, but the British Empire was so successful at colonizing all of those countries for so long. I mean, India was under its rule for over hundreds of years, right? And that's because they found, brown people who were willing to oppress their other brown people for like a better pillow or a nicer table to eat at. We're always betraying like our brother or our cousin or whatever. Again, despicable.
Yeah, a lot of the arguments that I've seen about, the transatlantic slave trade wasn't that bad, actually, is, well, people in African countries had slaves too, and they were enslaving their own country people. And it's like, well, that doesn't mean that shipping people off to another country and completely stripping them of their humanity was a good thing. And people are not a monolith. You will unfortunately find in a lot of societies there is a certain degree of hierarchy where some people have more power and some people have less. And that is not an excuse to perpetuate and even, significantly worsen just because it's like, well, these people did it too.
Atlantic slave trade was especially heinous because it took people out of their region where they could reintegrate after their term of slavery was over. Like, it made it impossible for anyone to reintegrate into society. Unlike the Celts who were indentured servitude, like, they were able to reintegrate once their term was over. Were they oppressed? Sure. Was it as bad? Was it even comparable? No, absolutely not. And trying to say that is acting in bad faith. There are a lot more educated people than me on the internet talking about this, but my goodness. Wow. Okay. Sorry. I get really triggered. 'Cause in my country, in my town even, I experience this stuff quite regularly, and I'm not safe to disagree.
Yeah.
I just have to sort of sit and take it. And so when I'm in my safe space in my living room, I lash out a little at society. Is there a diagnosis of being PTSD'd against your own society?
I mean, I think that Hind is probably better to answer in diagnoses, but I think it is very complex trauma arising from
like there's a cultural
racialization
experience
is
right now
Yeah.
that nobody wants to codify in the literature because it would require us to make systemic changes so that our society were less traumatic for people to experience. You were going to be my first expert talking about sexuality, intersections, and gender identity as well. So I want to make sure we jump into all of that. Let's talk about your diagnostic experience, I guess. Did you always know you were neurodivergent? Did you struggle in school?
No. that I knew I was weird. I always knew I was weird, but
Mm.
neurodivergence was not a label that I put
At
on
the time.
was probably not until I was in my late 30s that I started putting together some of the experiences that I was having with some of this sounds quite a lot like people who are autistic are describing about their experiences. And it wasn't until I started dating I was going to say current partner. They were already diagnosed autistic and ADHD. And I had a conversation with them where I said, I've been having a really big think about myself and my life. And I've been thinking that maybe it's possible that possibly maybe I might have some traits of some kind of neurodivergence, maybe couching it as possible, as much as possible in every possible way. And their response was, well, duh, are you just working with like that? And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Thanks so much for that. So it was another win for peer review for neurodivergence of having somebody who was a peer going, have you ever thought that you might be autistic? Definitely way up there.
So, did you get officially diagnosed?
I have an official diagnosis of autism. It's one of the things that I retrospect, there's not much in my life that I regret, but it is probably one of the things where with hindsight I look back on it and think I kind of wish that systems of power did not have that information about me, and it's actually not changed all that much about how I relate to myself. I have gained a lot more self-knowledge and self-acceptance from spending more time with other neurodivergent people than I have from going to a series of 4 appointments where a psychologist asked me a whole bunch of questions. Not dyslexic. I suspect, although again I've not been diagnosed, I have dyscalculia. So I have a very difficult and complicated relationship with numbers. And I have a lot of the kinds of experiences with numbers that I hear dyslexic people talking about with letters and words, where if I'm writing down a string of numbers that is being read to me, I will quite often write 3 when someone says 5 or 9 when someone says 6. So things that look like they rotate get mixed up in my head. And I also find it quite difficult to get numbers in the correct order. So if somebody says, these 6 numbers, write them down, I will usually write them all down, but not necessarily in the correct order. So
You'd be
math was
terrible in a call center.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, I did work in a call center for a while, and entering numbers I can do really well with I always get a keyboard with a number pad in the corner because I can spatially orient them. So when people are talking to me, I know that 9 is in the top right and 1 is in the bottom left. And if I'm doing that, I can type
That's
out
fantastic. But it's different
numbers.
when you have to write it with your hand.
Yeah. So yeah, keyboard accessibility tool. I can do numbers as long as I don't
I've
have to
heard
write
that.
them.
I've heard that from other people with dyslexia talking about writing, how they just couldn't write, like do handwriting, but as soon as they were allowed to use a computer for their assignments, things like they were actually really quite eloquent. And it's a shame that some of us go unacknowledged, I guess, and like don't get those simple, like imagine if you never knew that you could have a number pad on your keyboard.
Yeah. I mean, it was a big change for me. And it was at that point I realized that like back in the days before mobile phones, cell phones, where you would have, well, I know that in our house we had like a
The rotary.
landline phone with a digital keypad, and I would memorize numbers according to the pattern on the pad rather than the actual this number and then this number and then this number.
Yes.
It was a shape in my head of how it goes onto the like 9 keys of a number pad. Yeah. Spatial is easier for me than actual digits.
I love that. I feel like people who are listening are going to resonate with that because, yeah, patterns. Amazing.
So tell me how you started doing what you're doing now, and what made you gravitate towards it. Was there a traumatic experience or an unfortunate one that made you think I need to to fill in the gap?
So, in terms of the work that I'm doing now, I was always kind of drawn towards sort of human behavior and human experiences, very similarly to how after getting an autism diagnosis or even just recognizing that I'm autistic, I would look back over experiences in my own life and understand them through the lens of, and I was autistic at the time. And it's like, oh, when that was happening, I was autistic. And actually now I can understand that as quite a quintessentially autistic experience. I also look back through my life and look at the ways that I kind of drifted towards and then pulled myself back from doing some kind of like psychotherapy, psychological work. So when I was at university, I volunteered for a listening service where we had some very kind of basic counselling skills training. And I would go in they did like 8 p.m. until 8 a.m. They had shifts and you would go and sit in a room and answer the phone and talk to whoever. And they might be phoning up saying, could you tell me a pizza delivery place in my area? Or they might be saying, everything is awful and I don't want this life anymore, and you just dealt with what came in. My undergraduate degree, which I did in business studies, my undergraduate dissertation was in mentorship programs for new graduates in like corporate businesses that were doing training programs for new graduates. So I was talking about the importance of like mentorship and guiding people through basically learning the culture of being in a workplace. And then I did training as a workplace coach, which again is a lot of similar skills to psychotherapy, but the way I tend to conceptualize it is that coaching is mostly forward looking. So it is, yes, understanding your present and some things about your past, but how does this relate to where you are going? What do you want to achieve? How are you going to move forward? And then realizing that I danced around it for far too long, went and did my counseling training starting in 2018. And thought, yeah, it would be quite nice to do that at some point in the future, maybe. And then got into doing the training and went, yeah, I should have done this years ago. This is where I've always wanted to be. And it does feel very much like, and again, I'm sure a lot of people can also relate to this, studying people as an autistic person and trying to understand how I fit into, how do people behave in this situation? What do people feel? How do they know that they're feeling that? How do they figure out emotions? How does all of this work? How are they understanding their world? It was a really important thing for me, I think, to try and understand myself sort of through the experiences of other people and going, oh yeah, I get that too, or wow, that could never be me, or whatever. Yeah, it feels like studying like psychology and the way that people experience the world. I mean, it's a special interest for me, but it is also a way that I have helped myself to understand my own experiences better.
Yes, isn't it great when your special interest is your job? Yeah,
I've actually
yeah.
had conversations because I have a clinical supervisor, and I've had conversations with my clinical supervisor of like, in case of emergency, break glass, what will you do if your special interest in your work area wanes? How are you going to manage having a job that is no longer your special interest? It's not happened
Exactly.
yet, but at some point it's like, we're just going to put a pin in that and come back to it if we need to, because that is a different way of motivating yourself if you're not just, this is what I want to think about all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask about like how you help clients through identity exploration. I've been calling that process identity reformation, because yeah, it's really like a process of reflecting and like recategorizing it all. But yeah, like how can people try to conceptualize that on their own? What sorts of questions might they start asking?
So depending on what kind of identity we are talking about, in fact, no, it probably works for a lot of identities that someone could discover in the course of their life, rather than a kind of like a racialized identity or a class-based identity, which is something that you're probably always going to have been immersed in to some degree. If it is
Yeah.
the identity that you can discover as you go through your life, like, hey, turns out I'm neurodivergent, or I've been thinking about it and it turns out that I am not heterosexual, or, whatever. I think that sort of approaching that with a curiosity and an openness to whatever somebody is bringing to that. So rather than, I think that a lot of my own personal individual exploration of my own identities went through an iterative process of, what if I was, no, that can't be it. And like kind of squashing that down, and instead going, what if I was this kind of a person? And then actually allowing that to be,
Mm.
and sitting with that and thinking, all right, well, what does that mean? How does that sit with me? What are the feelings that come up in relation to that? How do I feel in my body when I'm thinking about things in that way? Does it feel right? Does it feel not right? Does it feel, I don't know, spiky, fluffy, warm, cold, pink, beige? I don't know. Lots of people will conceptualize this in different ways. But that kind
Beautiful.
of having an openness for whatever the answer is, that's okay. Because I think that a lot of neurodivergent experiences of particularly like historically diagnostic experiences, and sometimes like ed psych kind of experiences, can be, we found out that you've got this that is wrong with you, this is how we're going to try to fix it. Because there is an idea that, we were talking before about this idea of the norm and how far you deviate from it. It is, the norm is correct, you are deviant. How do we move you back towards the norm? And the approach that I take is more of an affirmative one, and also of an ongoing exploration. So in gender and sexuality particularly, somebody coming along and saying, my gender feels weird, but I don't think I'm trans. Definitely not trans. But I don't like being referred to by the pronouns that I was assigned at birth. And I think there are some things that I might want to change about my body, but I'm definitely not trans. And instead of going, yeah, but it sounds like you are though, and like imposing that view on someone else, to go, that's all right. You don't have to be trans to change your body. You don't have to be trans to change your pronouns or your name. You can just try using a new name, or ask people to use different pronouns, or in a therapeutic space, ask me to use a new name and new pronouns. I'm never going to tell anybody else about that. If you just do that in this space and see how it feels, that's fine. And if you try it and you go, no, that's not it, then that's okay. Nobody's holding you to anything. You don't have to nail down a perfect identity. This is an exploration. We're on an adventure. Let's see where it goes.
Love that. Love how, even though you're not currently in a session with a client, you created this non-judgmental cloud that I feel I'm on right now that feels very safe. Thank you.
Yeah.
I like exploring. It's good to like, I love to daydream. There are some neurodivergents that like put on something in the background all the time, and I don't do that. My brain just plays it.
And that can be really, people will have a different degree to which they have an elaborated internal world. So from my experience, I don't have a visual internal world at all. I was in it was when I started doing my psychotherapy training that I realized that the term mind's eye wasn't just a metaphor, and that some people actually see things in their mind. I don't. If I close my eyes, it's black. If I visualize something, it is usually like the director's commentary. And if somebody is asking me to visualize something, like imagine you're on a beach, I'm then getting the commentary that goes, okay, it's a sunny day and the sand is soft and it's kind of whitish and the sea is like a greeny blue. So I'm like filling in like an audio book. So different people will have different experiences. I could play music in my head. I will remember a song that I've listened to and I can just like play it through in my head and hear it like I'm hearing it in the external world. So yeah,
That's
for some
amazing.
people, being able to make their own entertainment is a really helpful part of their own internal world.
Yeah, it is. Again, non-judgmental space.
Thank you. I have one more note in here about social and cultural layers of communication differences. I think we were talking about Old Irish last time,
Mm.
but I just don't remember how that older language forms oral traditions, whereas communication differences weren't always like
Mm.
okay, I remember. It's
Yeah,
because
it's coming
dyslexia
back to me.
didn't always used to be a thing. It's
So,
only sort of exists because we have a written language. But before we used to have mostly oral language, and
and I
so
think that is,
communications.
yeah, being a society that now communicates in a very different way. The expectations of high literacy rates, the kind of essentially creation of a disability of not really working with written language is only a thing that really happens because we're no longer, as you say, communicating through spoken language, through story, through mythology. And I think the other way that I've heard it described as well in terms of that sort of communication and the way that language is used. I remember reading this wonderful blog post that was talking about communicating as a neurodivergent person with people who are not neurodivergent or who wouldn't think of themselves as neurodivergent, and said that from her experience, it is like being a first language English speaker trying to exist in France. And when you first get there, the language barrier is huge, and it doesn't matter how you're trying to communicate, it's not really coming across. And over time, you may choose to invest energy and time in getting better
Yeah,
at speaking French so that
yeah,
you can be better understood. But at the end of the day, you are still going to be speaking at a different level if everybody around you is thinking in French and you are thinking in English and translating into French and then speaking. It's
Mm.
just a different kind of communication.
yeah. Um, there is it, and it seeps through even in the foreign language. So the way I think is in Arabic,
Mm.
and so it seeps through. We say open and close the light.
Mm.
And I don't think that's how you guys say it. You say turn on, turn off the lights,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
We say open and
Except for
close.
me,
All
because I
Arabs.
say crazy stuff all the time, like silly duck when the phrase is silly goose, and yeah, turn
Yeah.
off the light, and yeah.
But a lot of Arabs, I think all Arabs say close and open because if you translate that into
Latin as
Arabic,
well.
it
Spanish.
translates into that. It's open, بفتح الليت, سكر الليت. So open and close. So it seeps through the second language, whether you like it or not, the way you think.
Mm. Yeah. And it's similar,
Fascinating.
kind of having grown up in Wales, the way that the Welsh language comes through into the English that is spoken in the area where I grew up and now live again. There is no separate word for borrow or lend. It's the same word. So whether you are on
Okay.
the receiving end or the giving end, the word is the same. Similarly, the word for learn or teach is dysgu. Same either way. So whether you are learning, you will, if you're learning Welsh, dysgu Cymraeg. If you are teaching Welsh, dysgu Cymraeg. I'm teaching you Welsh, you are learning Welsh. So there is a different conceptualization of some of those kind of like verbs of lending, borrowing, teaching, learning, things that we tend to think of as having like a giver and a receiver are, no, you are both engaged in this process.
In relationship with each other, rather
It's
than
beautiful.
assigning hierarchy within the relationship.
The other one that's just come into my mind as
I
well,
love
there is a
that.
word that performs a lot of roles in the Welsh language, which is the word eto, which means both again and still. So you can say,
That.
you know, have you done that again, or are you still doing that? Is it a present continuous, or is it, you know, like another iteration of the thing that you have done before?
It really does. So I really love your analogy, or your friends, and it was a friend's analogy. Am I right?
I
Yeah.
think it was a blog post that I read. I would
Yeah.
love to see if I can find it again, because it was just such a beautiful encapsulation of thinking of neurodivergence as speaking a different kind of language. And both of the languages are perfectly valid. It's just that
Yeah.
if you are a first language neurotypical speaker speaking to somebody who is a first language neurodivergent speaker, one or the other of you is going to have to make adjustments to communicate, and you're probably never going to really completely mesh with each other in how you communicate.
I think the new approach, and I hope it spreads within the community and then the medical world and industrial world, is that it's a two-way street. Not only do we have to learn French, you might need to learn English as well. This way, it makes it a collaboration.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And it is I have a book next to me, which is my current, like, I'm working my way through it because it's great. I'm going to hold it up. I don't know whether you can see it. It's written backwards. It's called Working. Let me try coming closer. There we go. So
Working
within
within diversity.
So it is this Myra Khan, who is a counsellor working in the kind of Midlands, is a visibly Muslim, visibly brown woman working in a predominantly white field because, you know, professionalisation has been incredibly white historically, and talked about her experiences of doing the diversity training and noticing that she was being expected to empathise with the white counsellor and the person in the position of power who was making accommodations for the client who was brown and lower down in the power hierarchy. And she was watching the videos and going, I'm relating to the client in this situation, but you're expecting me to relate to the counsellor. And what she talks about with working within diversity is this idea that we all have culture. We all have identities. It's not that one of them is the norm and the other is the divergence from the norm. It is that you have your experiences and I have my experiences. And if we are within that, we are figuring this out together, rather than I am trying to become culturally competent so that I can work with you, a weirdo.
Yeah. Perfect. I think that's a great way to end this episode. How can people reach you? How can people use your services? Let them know.
Oh, good. So I have pared down my social media significantly. The only place that you can now find me on is on Instagram, where you can find me at therapy_with_Zoe. My website is therapywithzoe.co.uk. If people want to come and have a look at what I'm up to and how I work, they can come and have a look there. I will be keeping people up to date with my, you know, kind of day-to-day experiences and also what I'm going to be doing next, professionally speaking, on Instagram as well. So come along, follow me. Let's meet up in virtual space and it with some new people.
Are you still doing your podcast?
I haven't done another episode. I do intend to resurrect it, but I realised that I need to take a leaf out of your book where I need to get a stack of episodes in the bank before I start releasing things, because I got too excited. I recorded 2 episodes, I put them out there, and then I ran out of steam. So I need to regain my steam. And so far it's been a monologue podcast, and I would very much like to get into something that is more discursive, because it's just more fun to talk with other people. And I think it's more fun to listen to other people talking with each other too. So that is something that I would like to do some more of. So if anybody wants to come and follow me preemptively before I get it back up and the running, the podcast is called At the Intersection, Turn Left. And you can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the places where you can get podcasts.
Well, we have a lot of intersections. So if you want some help padding out that episode list, let us know. You have our
Thank you very much. I very much appreciate that. Keep an eye on your emails. I'm sure I'll be getting in touch.
And I'm just going to ask you a super fun question.
Cool.
I have this card deck called the Delve deck. It's a joy edition. So hopefully I'm going to ask you something that's really joyful, because every once in a while there'll be something really deep and like not the vibe.
Yeah.
Super true. All right. Here we go. Okay. What life experience ended up being a lot better than you imagined?
I have discovered that I enjoy the correct kind of networking. So my old job when I still worked in the NHS was network manager, and I hated it. It felt like a slog. It felt forced. It felt difficult. And since I've come into this line of work and I am connecting with like-minded people about things that I am interested in, and I'm talking about things that they are interested in, where we can support each other in our respective endeavors, I've realized that creating a network is actually really fulfilling. And it doesn't just have to be some kind of horrible icebreaker, forcing conversation, handing over business cards situation. It can be a beautiful meeting of minds. And that, I think I just needed to find the correct environment in which to do that. And doing stuff like this just feels like that is what the kind of network that I want to create.
Building up experiences of it going well, too.
Yeah. Reparative experiences all the way down now. I'm only doing things that feel like they are rewriting my history.
I love that. Okay. Yeah. Amazing. It was so
Thank
nice
you so
talking
much
with you today.
for
Yeah.
the beautiful conversation. I really appreciate it.
Really enjoyed it. And thank you for coming here and spending some time with us.
Thanks for being here. If you want to connect with the Neurodivergent Report, you can find us at ND Report Pod on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, Substack, etc.
If you're looking to support the show, the best thing you can do is subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Please do that.
And hey, if you want to check out more about us, visit our website at ndreportpod.com. And you can also go there if you want to be a guest contributor on the show.
Until next time, be well, do good.
Bye.